Hey guys, welcome back to the video. In this video, we're ranking all 9 final fights in the Rocky franchise. So as many of you guys know, I watched the Rocky franchise for the very first time over the last 2 months in preparation for Creed 3. So in this video, I have a tier list pulled up where I'll be ranking all 9 fights from the worst to the best. The tiers that I have are bad, meh, great, and best of the best. Before I get into my ranking, let me know your ranking for all 9 of these fights in the comments down below. As you guys can see on screen, these aren't in any particular order, but starting it off, we have Clubber versus Rocky in Rocky 3, if I'm not mistaken. And I would say this was a meh fight. I really like the whole, like, Rocky's gonna train again because this guy, like, he retires and then he doesn't really want, like, Mickey doesn't want him to fight and stuff like that. And so I really like the story behind this fight. But just in terms of stakes and kind of understanding, like, what the bigger picture is for the franchise, this doesn't seem like it does much for me personally. I also just think Clubber is, like, a very weird person in the ring because he's so hyper. He's always, like, going, but that's not really Rocky's style. So I kind of felt a little bit of a clash in that sense. Overall, I'm a fan of the fight. It's just not on, like, the higher tier overall. Next up on the list, though, we have Adonis versus Pretty Ricky Conan. I think that's what his name is. Fighting Pretty Ricky Conan! I'm gonna put this one at great. I do honestly think that this is an amazing fight. On a technical aspect, though, just because we had that, like, mid-movie fight in Creed where it was that one big take, that was really great, and that set my expectations really high. And on a technical level, this is still a great fight, by the way. I just really love the way that, like, they do a lot of camera tracking, and this is really the introduction to a new style of camera work in the ring that kind of influences the rest of the Creed movies. But just in terms of, like, how good the fights were earlier in the movie, I would put this in best of the best, but I feel like they could have implemented some of the technical aspects from earlier in the movie, and that would have bumped this one a lot higher for me. Next up on the list, though, we have the original fight from Rocky 1, Rocky versus Apollo. Hot take, I'm gonna go great, but I'm honestly putting, I'm just gonna put this slightly above Pretty Ricky Conan versus Adonis, because I feel like this fight, it's just the OG, like, it's the original, you know, like, it sets up the franchise, sets up storytelling, but also choreography wise, it doesn't do much that's super unique. Like, you can obviously, like, it's a very old movie. I just really like the stakes of this and how, like, Rocky finally has a shot to prove himself, and this is what he's been training for. This is the classic Rocky franchise underdog story, so for that reason I really like it. But again, on a technical level, all these other aspects that I feel like honestly just the best excel at, this movie doesn't really do much for me. But then we get to the Rocky and Apollo rematch in Creed 2, and this is probably my hottest take in this entire video, but I'm going best of best strictly because this is the only fight in the entire franchise that brought me to, like, near tears because of just how emotional it was.
Balboa has shocked the world. He is the new heavyweight champion of the world.
And I really like the whole thing of, like, Rocky being just super, I guess, pretentious, and, like, he won his fight, he has a lot of money, now he's doing ads, but like, they're all kind of, like, set in their life. And then Apollo wants a rematch, and Rocky's just super overconfident, and he's not training as much as he should. He's doing press, and you see Apollo actually training, and then at the very end, you kind of have them fight, and then it's just up to the bell. It's so close, but Rocky makes it out alive, and I love the stakes that this one has. And I feel like to a certain extent, Creed 2 as a whole does dumb down Rocky a lot in the beginning, just to kind of craft that underdog story, but the final battle really works for me, and I do take Rocky 2 over Rocky 1. You guys can check out my full Rocky movies ranked video. It'll be linked on screen somewhere here or in the description down below, but I really love this movie, and I think this ending is so perfect for these characters and kind of this friendship that's going to blossom in Rocky 3. And so again, I think this final battle just does so much for the franchise. And again, I understand this is a very hot take, but I'm sticking by this. Next up, though, we have the final fight in Rocky 5, and I'm going to be honest, I enjoy this fight. I'm going bottom of meh. Again, I don't think it's an amazing fight by any means. There's also a lot of plot holes. Like, why can this dude just keep punching Rocky in the head and nothing's gonna happen, even though the whole plot of this movie is driven around Rocky having, like, a brain issue? I really enjoy, like, the choreography and how it's just, like, they're in the streets and they're going, I mean, I think the problem is there's no stakes, right? As much as I enjoy the choreography, I enjoy how handheld it is, I enjoy how raw the fighting really feels, I still feel like there's no stakes to this fight, and that's kind of where it just becomes the worst, one of the worst fights in the franchise, or at least one of the worst final fights in the franchise. When you don't feel any emotion, it's just like punches, punches, punches. That's it. Like there's no like, and also the fact that there's no like big stadium or announcers, like you just don't get the vibe that it's a big deal. And to end off a Rocky movie, I feel like you have to have something that is a big deal, something that makes you feel like, okay, we built up to this. It doesn't really feel like that here, in my opinion.
Father, this is my new friend, Tommy Gunn.
Then we have the final fight in Creed 2 against Drago's son and Adonis, obviously. For this one, I'm going to go great, right above the original Rocky fight. And again, this might be another hot take. I feel like I have so many Rocky franchise hot takes. But anyways, I just really like the way that this genuinely feels like an underdog story, even more than Rocky versus Apollo in the first movie. Like this, you have... in. I think the story as a whole does have its faults because of how connected to Rocky IV is. But when you have this story and you have basically like this generational family trauma that's happening because of the Drago family, you kind of understand the stakes of it so much more. And I've obviously post watching this whole franchise with Apollo and Rocky's relationship, and then Apollo dies and you see the guilt in Rocky's life, and you see like how he's dealing with all of this trauma, right?
I was supposed to be in there with Drago that night, and not your father. And I could have thrown in the towel. I didn't. And I gotta live with that.
This fight feels like it encapsulates it all, and it really feels like it's the grand buildup. And honestly, Creed 2 could have been the end of the franchise. Like you were kind of calling back to the original franchise, or the original movies in the Rocky franchise, and then you're kind of moving forward with it a little bit by adding some layers to why Rocky doesn't want to help Adonis in this whole like thing of fighting Drago's kid, and you have all these and it works really well as a conclusion. And then they go on and make Creed 3 because this final fight makes it feel like, okay, like Adonis has done what he needs to do. Like he has done what his dad couldn't do. He has beaten, like he's made a legacy of his own, and then you can move forward from there. And that's why I think it works really, really well. And also this fight is just brutal as hell. Like these two opponents are going neck and neck. And obviously every single fight is like that to create tension and all of that kind of stuff. But this feels really brutal. Like it's like Apollo versus Victor Drago, but on a whole other level. Like it's like that if it lasted all 12 rounds. Like it's insane. And then we have the final fight in Rocky 6, Rocky Balboa. This one, I think it's a good fight. I would put it at top of meh, just because like I would put it between meh and great. My biggest problem with this fight is just that it feels very unrealistic. And also, like I remember this fight a lot because of like the super sporadic editing, and that was really, really fun, and I really enjoyed that. But aside from that, I didn't really feel anything like... I think since Rocky was already retired and they didn't put too much emphasis on his like health, and like they did in terms of like when he's going to start training and all that kind of stuff. But like in terms of the fight itself, they weren't like, oh my God, you're going to die. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't any like internal Rocky stakes here. It was more just like, are you going to come back out of retirement and then get absolutely clapped in the ring? And this does feel like another great underdog origin story, which I really, really like how they build that tension up. But again, the fight's just so unrealistic for me. It's like my biggest pro to this fight is that it really brings together the whole familial aspect of Rocky and him kind of being like, I'm going to fight one last time, and I need to do this because obviously Adrian passed away. He's not that close with his son anymore. Mickey is kind of in his visions. And so it's like you have like this big culmination of everything that happens in the Rocky franchise. So for that, I think this fight is good. It's a great culmination, but the fight in and of itself is not the best thing in the world. And then we have the Rocky IV fight, Rocky versus Drago. And I think this goes at, honestly, I'm going to go right below the Adonis versus Drago's son. I keep forgetting his name, but Drago's son rematch fight. So I'm going to go right under there just because I really like the stakes that this one has, and also the build up to it is really, really great. Like the way that he's fighting, that he goes to Russia to train, and you see him, and then Adrian comes out there, and she's like, "Okay, I believe in you," and like it feels like a great culmination of the Rocky movies before because of Adonis's death and the way that all plays out. I just really, really like the way that they go about telling this story against Drago. And once again, they do a great thing of just bringing you back to the familial side of it. And it feels like a very family-based fight because Apollo felt like family. And so I think this leans into the strengths of the franchise in terms of like what's at stake. And then obviously it's another brute force fight, just like Adonis versus Drago's son. And then a lot of these other like big fights where it's just like Rocky's getting absolutely beat up.
Drago just smiled at him.
but then you start to see like these little combinations, and they slowly start to like pick the fight up little by little by little, and then obviously Rocky wins. So it's a great way to just, the pacing of this fight, that's what I'm trying to say, is like the pacing of this fight is really well done. But now for the final fight in the newest movie, Creed 3. This is probably my hottest take of all. I think this is the best final fight in the entire franchise. And I know a lot of people are going to hate me for that take, but I genuinely believe so. I really just love the way that this fight is so thematically prevalent. And honestly, technologically, it's easily the most advanced fight that we've ever seen in this franchise. Because it's the most recent one. That's all obviously going to happen. But also the fact they're shot on IMAX cameras enhances this fight so much. And maybe a lot of people just find that it was way too much going on, or it just was too unrealistic. But I just love the choreography in this fight as well. Like, I just love, and Michael B. Jordan said, yes, there's anime inspirations. I didn't catch any of them because I don't watch, I have never seen an anime in my life. And so I couldn't be like, oh, this punch is from that, this move is from that. But it's like, just without that, like not knowing that it's from an anime, just seeing these moves was crazy in the boxing ring. And it's on a technical level, it's done so well. And you see every impact. You feel like you're getting punched in the gut. And that's what I kind of want from a final fight. I really did feel like I got that from the Victor Rocco rematch, the final fight in Rocky 4. I really felt like I got that in that fight because I felt like I was on that journey with Rocky. I also do understand the argument that whenever they have that full like CG replacement in the background, like the whole background is CG replaced because they speed through the middle of the fight by just having them in like an empty ring, and it's basically like a one-on-one. Everything's like super echoey. There's no sounds of the crowd. It's just them two in the ring.
I need you to let go of your fear. Let go of the guilt. Let go of whatever was and walk into what is.
In their corners, getting up, fighting, punching, going back, punching, and then you get back to the big crowd, right? And so I understand why a lot of people might think that, oh, that just took me out of the fight. Like, there's no like big environment, you know, Dodger Stadium is too big. Like, we don't get to actually feel the impact in the crowd. But to that, at least personally, I say this is a story about two brothers.
Damien was like family. Now we past talking.
Then maybe you just have to find out.
It isn't a story about who's there to make the biggest impact on the world. Like Rocky versus Apollo, for example, was about who's like the people's person, like who is the people's champion. That wasn't what this movie was about, at least, especially for Michael B. Jordan's Adonis. Like, Adonis isn't here to prove to people anything. He's here to put down Damien. And that's the only goal with this fight, in my opinion, at least from Adonis's perspective. But guys, that's it for my ranking of all 9 final fights in the Rocky franchise. As always, let me know your ranking in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.